Boxer is definitely not an episode that I rank very high. The guys get separated, Kenny goofs off, the competition doesn't even happen, and the best part of the episode is poorly documented. For the opening couch scene, Kenny wears a Gordy t-shirt from his film It Don't Cost Nothing to Say Good Morning. After that, there are very few formal rules. They seem to agree on a 13-round bout.
13 rounds in the ring.
They agree to use helmets.
And I don't want to have permanent
Headgear's fine.
They agree to have a referee.
What about a referee?
Yeah, we'll get a ref, no problem.
And those are all of the rules for the boxing match. They don't choose a style of boxing. So Spenny says he's going with kickboxing because Kenny will probably try to employ kickboxing as a surprise tactic. Spenny begins his training by going to the boxing gym and training with Mick McNamara. Mick is a trained kickboxer who's been in a couple of kung fu films. In really simplified terms, there was a period of time when Canada outlawed MMA fighting and kickboxing fell under that MMA umbrella. So Mick and his brother had their livelihood swept out from under them. They weren't allowed to teach or train in kickboxing for a time. Eventually it wasn't banned anymore, but Mick has made a stink about it ever since, even going so far as to try and sue the federal government. So far he has been unsuccessful. And it's really not worth anybody's time to unpack it any more than that. Kenny pays a contractor to line the closet with 1-inch thick plywood and soundproofing behind that.
It's 1-inch ply, there's soundproofing behind it.
The problem with that is neither of those things are true. This is not 1-inch ply. This is 1/2-inch ply. I've built enough stuff to eyeball 1/2-inch ply when I see it. Second, not only is it not soundproofed, the contractor didn't even lay strapping down to create a space for soundproofing insulation. He just attached the ply directly to the base trim and the shelf support. Look at it when Kenny pulls it away from the wall. There's no soundproofing there. Well, maybe he put up 2 layers of 1/2-inch plywood to make it 1 inch thick. We never see the contractor put up a second layer, and when Kenny tears it down, we only see 1 layer with no soundproofing behind it. Is this door really solid oak? Spenny makes a run at it. It's a pretty weak run, but I think it would still be enough to at least split one of those cardboard doors down the middle. I don't know. I'll give it to Kenny. The door is strong, okay? So Kenny goes to Niagara Falls. After departing Niagara Helicopters, Kenny begins his day at the east end of Clifton Hill with an ice cream cone at Fun Factory before moving west through Funhouse, Dracula's Castle, the Criminal Hall of Fame, and Cash Doro Italian Restaurant. Kenny ends up letting his conscience get the better of him. He returns to the house, lets Spenny out of the closet, and inevitably doesn't show up to the boxing match, resulting in a forfeit. So what items are in Spenny's prison? Going from left to right on the top shelf, Tylenol, apples, granola bars, TV VCR combo with a movie, toothpaste, toothbrush, another toothpaste, mouthwash. On the bottom shelf, left to right, books, water, a cup, and the toilet bucket, the luggable loo. Also the red couch cushions on the floor for a bed. There are 2 cameras in the room, this one and this one. In a social media post that I can't find again, a user suggested that Spenny being locked in the closet must be fake because, number 1, Spenny would see all the recording equipment in Kenny's room and the wires leading into the closet, so he would have known something was up and he never would have voluntarily walked into the closet. And number 2, someone would have to sit outside the closet changing the tape every 3 hours to constantly record Spenny. So either A, they wouldn't have paid a guy to do that, or B, Spenny would have seen a stack of tapes ready to go and known something was up. Therefore, the episode is fake. Spenny must have gone in, recorded a scripted monologue, performed a bunch of tasks relevant to a person who is locked in a closet for a day, and was then let out of the prison closet in a matter of minutes, maybe hours. Okay, well let's think about number 1. The closet had 2 cameras in it and a bunch of wires running under the door here. Why would Spenny think twice about that? As far as Spenny knows, Kenny has made a gym and will record himself working out for content. So it would be completely reasonable to see recording equipment in the room and wires going into the closet. Oh, okay, well what about the second problem? Well, what's wrong with someone staying in the room to change tapes in the recorder? Like, I don't think that would be unreasonable either. You say to an employee, come back every 3 hours and change the tape. And with regard to a stack of tapes being in the room, why would Spenny have a problem with that? In this episode, Kenny has a major stack of tapes by the closet door. He's had tapes there since at least the Who Do Kids Like More episode, which according to me and my chronologically confused video was 10 episodes ago. The stack is a little bit larger now than it was then, but the point I'm making is that Kenny has a lot of VHS tapes around. He's a film guy. A stack of them being in the room wouldn't be unusual. So Spenny wouldn't have a reason to think twice about it. Continuing with conspiracies, there's also the idea that because the hinges are on the inside of the door, Spenny should have just popped them out and removed the door. Maybe? Kinda? Like it might be possible? I've removed a lot of doors, and there's rarely been a door where I could remove even one of the 2 or 3 hinge pins with my fingers. I would normally use some sort of tool, like a punch or a screwdriver, or even a nail to push up on the pin from the bottom. I've thought about this one quite a bit, and there are only 2 items in the room which could be used as a tool for pushing up on the pins. The prongs on the television plug and the handle on the bucket. Depending on the hinge, the prongs are likely too wide to push up on the pin from the bottom. Maybe he could have used the prongs as a flathead screwdriver and tried to pry up on the head of the pin, but that might be wishful thinking depending on the length of the cord, because while possible, in order to get to the top pin with the plug, Spenny would likely have to either hold the TV in one arm and manipulate the pin with the other, or rip the cord right out of the TV. Now, if the bucket handle could be removed, it could be straightened out into a punch or a poker. However, since the handle is made with a gauge of metal thick enough to carry the weight of the bucket when it's full, I'm willing to bet that it's already too strong for Spenny to bend with his bare hands and remove from the bucket, let alone shape into something useful. So I'm not going to fault Spenny for not trying to remove the pins on the door. I'm going back and adding this paragraph to the script because it's impossible to ignore. How did Spenny walk right by these sliding locks and not at least ask about them? I get that he wouldn't have immediately thought, oh, these locks must indicate the closet has been transformed into a prison. But really? He didn't even ask, hey Kenny, why does your gym have these giant locks on the outside of it? Does that mean this episode is fake? I don't know. Is Spenny so naive that he may have walked by and not picked up on it? Yeah, he is. Here's my problem with the episode. Even though I can argue in the guy's favor against the previous accusations, there is other evidence supporting the idea that instead of being locked in the closet overnight, Spenny went into the room, recorded a monologue for a short period of time, and was then let out of the room. Beginning my argument on what the narrative declares to be day 3, Kenny leaves Niagara Falls in a hurry at what they claim to be 5:37 a.m. Is it really dawn, 5:37 a.m., or is it dusk, roughly 7 p.m.? The reason that's such an important question is that it will help determine if Kenny actually spent the night in Niagara Falls. If the narrative isn't actually a linear series of events filmed as they happen, if it's actually a script being filmed in a random order and cut together, then there would be no need for Kenny to stay overnight in Niagara Falls. He could have just feigned concern for Spenny, left the hotel room at 7 p.m. when the sun is going down, and then cut it all together in the editing suite to fit the narrative. My suspicions are aroused by the number of people milling around at 5:37 a.m. There's at least 7 outside Circus World, and another 6 outside Ripley's World here. You can barely see them, but they're there. I looked at the frames really closely. So is it possible that this is actually sunset and Kenny skipped town while these people were just beginning their evening? When Kenny goes to the hotel room, there is light in the window, and over time, the window in the room goes pitch black. When Kenny leaves in the morning, there's a small bit of dusk light creeping across the sky. Based on that, I fully believe he spent the night at the hotel and departed the next morning. As for all those people touring around at 5:37 a.m., Niagara Falls is Canada's Las Vegas, except 1/10 as big. It's a 24-hour town is my point, so is it reasonable to assume they were still partying at 5:37 a.m.? Yes it is. Kenny stayed at the Travel Lodge on Clifton Hill. How do I know? Besides their sign being in a few of the shots, I examined the relation of the casino tower to local hotels and determined Kenny did in fact stay at the Travelodge Hotel. Why is that important? Google indicates that the drive from the Travelodge on Clifton Hill in Niagara Falls to 7 Earl Street, Toronto takes 1 hour and 27 minutes. Meaning if Kenny left Niagara Falls at 5:37 a.m., then by the time he goes up to let Spenny out of the closet, it should be 7:04 a.m. or thereabouts. The evidence I have which suggests Spenny only spent a short amount of time in the closet to record his monologue is this clock. We see Spenny get locked in at 10:39. I'm assuming that's a.m. because it would be consistent with the timing of the episode. Kenny says this is morning of day 2.
All right, it's morning of day 2.
Spenny still has his pajamas on. We see Spenny get locked in, and as the scene carries out, we can see the clock advance in a way that is both linear and consistent with the narrative. Now it's 10:42, 10:43, 10:44. That's all fine. We don't see the clock again until Kenny comes to let Spenny out of the closet. As I said, the clock should say 7:04 or thereabouts. So why does it say 1:19? Even if he stopped for snacks and the local foam store to get some equipment, I don't think it should say anything later than 9 a.m. Maybe 10 a.m. It definitely says 1:19, not 7:19. You might say, oh, well, the horizontal bar on the LED, which would complete the 7, must be burned out. Well, I mean, it worked fine the day before. On day 2, it lit up the upper horizontal LED in the 0 of the 10. I think it works fine. So then you might say, oh, well, the clock must be running fast. I doubt it. I remember having one of these boxes from Cogeco in the early 2000s. The time on these receivers are set automatically by the provider. Like, they wouldn't have it set 6 hours fast. Furthermore, let's say it is fast. Let's say it's 6 hours fast. So it's not 1:19 p.m., it's actually 7:19 a.m. That would mean Kenny locked Spenny in the closet at 4:39 a.m. Yeah, I don't think so. No matter how I run the math, the excuse of the clock running fast doesn't work out. As the scene progresses, we see the clock change to 1:20. A moment before Spenny is let out, it says 1:22. So these are linear and consistent shots. This isn't a bit filmed here and a bit filmed there and then stuck together in an editing suite. The scene of letting Spenny out was one take that began at 1:19 p.m. But on which day? One of two things happened. Either Spenny got locked in at 10:43 a.m. of day 2, he recorded various monologue bits, then he was let out after 2 hours and 39 minutes. Or Spenny was locked in at 10:43 a.m. of day 2. Kenny returned to the house at 7:04 a.m. the next day, day 3, but he didn't let Spenny out for another 6 hours and 18 minutes at 1:22 p.m. And Spenny was in the room a total of 26 hours and 39 minutes. If the show is real, what the heck was Kenny doing for 6 hours and 18 minutes? He allegedly left urgently to let Spenny out.
Come on, guys, in.
But upon returning home, he didn't let him out for another 6 hours and 18 minutes. Is there any evidence suggesting Kenny's urgency was simply an act for the camera? Yes. While in Niagara Falls on day 2, he has a bath. He keeps his hair dry, and then he goes to bed. The next morning, when he's in a supposed hurry, his hair is all wet, like he took the time to have a shower right before he came rushing out of the room. Well, okay, maybe he just wet his hair to comb it a bit because he had bedhead. Since when does Kenny care about how he looks? If you listen to any of his commentary work, both from the DVDs and from his recent Kenny and Sebi commentaries, he took a certain amount of pride in his appearance being unkempt and therefore real. He believed the audience could relate to his personality better if he were just a regular guy, dirty and disheveled. With all due respect, taking the time to shower in the morning and clean up his appearance is strange behavior for Kenny, and it doesn't fit the narrative of a man with a guilty conscience making a hasty exit to free his friend from captivity. What else? Kenny expresses concern for the success of the episode and for Spenny's well-being on the journey to Niagara Falls. Well, when was that? This episode cuts immediately from Kenny leaving Spenny in the closet to Kenny landing in a helicopter. Where exactly is the segment when Kenny expresses concern on the drive from Toronto to Niagara Falls? There are shots of Kenny driving to Niagara Falls spliced into the scene where he is driving back from Niagara Falls. Kenny purchases and wears a green Niagara Falls shirt at the beginning of his day out. When he drives back to Toronto, he's wearing that green shirt. But at the moment of locking Spenny in the closet, he wore a white shirt. And there are shots of his return trip where he is wearing that white shirt. Look at the collar. Things Kenny says while in a white shirt were said on the way to Niagara Falls.
He's got he knows it's a strategy. It'll be a funny show. Him locked in the closet, me in Niagara Falls. It'll be funny. You'll see the show will be okay.
I am a madman. Please be okay, Spenny. I deserve to lose.
Things he says in a green shirt were said on the way back.
Look at the gray skies. Impending doom. Look at that.
In these shots, Kenny displays concern for Spenny long before we're expected to believe his conscience got the better of him. The narrative wants us to believe Kenny went on to have a carefree afternoon without even having a thought about Spenny until his mom called to check on him. Does this indicate that Kenny was rehearsing some kind of scripted dialogue on the way to Niagara Falls? Why would he be concerned about the success of the episode before it has the chance to play out?
It'll be a funny show. Him locked in the closet, me in Niagara Falls. It'll be funny. You'll see the show will be okay.
Those are some interesting points, but they also aren't really evidence of anything. They're just things that don't quite make sense. So, is there other evidence suggesting Spenny didn't actually spend the night in the closet? Yes, but it's kind of anecdotal nonsense. Spenny ate 1 granola bar, drank 2 bottles of water, and he didn't touch the apples. I would have thought that a man locked in a closet for 26 hours and 39 minutes would eat more simply out of boredom. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say his psychological distress may have suppressed his appetite. Is there evidence that Spenny didn't make a reasonable attempt to escape the prison? Spenny could have banged on the wall until the police showed up, but he didn't. I've spent enough time analyzing the floor plans of the different houses to make scale models with my eyes closed. Without dragging out photographic evidence, this wall is shared with the neighbors. The neighbors previously complained about the guys making too much noise. I already showed there was no soundproofing, and Spenny's banging was violent enough to shake the camera around. That being so, Spenny could have alerted for help by banging on the wall, but he didn't. Why didn't he? I must say, at this point, I'm not impressed with the number of plot holes I'm finding. Why did it take Kenny so long to let Spenny out if he was so urgently concerned? Why did Kenny take the time to take a shower? Why was Kenny concerned well before his conscience kicked in? Why did Spenny eat so little? Why didn't Spenny alert for help? I'm willing to sweep most of those things under the rug and make the claim that the episode is real. Sure, Kenny was always concerned for his friend's safety. Sure, he took a quick shower because he paid for the room, he might as well. Sure, he didn't eat that much because he had no appetite. Sure, he didn't bang on the wall for very long because his hands hurt. However, if the episode is real, then the only thing I can't pave over is the 6 hours and 18 minutes that are unaccounted for. What was Kenny doing for 6 hours and 18 minutes? Either Kenny goofed off for over 6 hours, or Spenny really only spent a little more than 2.5 hours in the closet. One of those things is true. All of that being said, I think it's real, because Kenny actually spent the night in Niagara Falls. If it were scripted, he wouldn't have had to do that. He could have just cut the necessary bits together for the narrative, just showed up in Niagara Falls for a day of fun, and then returned to Toronto at dusk, but he didn't. Kenny was concerned about the success of the episode before it had a chance to play out because the show is real. If the outcome resulted in a bad episode, he couldn't reshoot the competition. The footage they got is the footage he has to work with. And that's all I have for you on the boxing episode, because the actual competition never happened. There is no boxing match to talk about. But what if we just suppose for a minute? Let's say they actually did fight. Who would have won the fight? I've seen debate on both sides of the issue. Spenny was winning during the Woods fight, but Kenny was winning during the Soldier fight. Spenny has the reach, but Kenny has the low center of gravity. I can argue that Kenny is a better grappler and Spenny is a better pugilist. That being said, I think Spenny would have won for one simple reason. He's left-handed. You might say to me, oh, Mr. Analysis, Kenny's left-handed too. He lost a finger on his right hand in an exercise bike chain. Don't you know that? I thought you were some kind of KvS expert. Listen, Kenny writes with his left hand because he has to. However, Kenny is still right-hand dominant. Watch.
That's a jab, man.
Right-hand fighters jab with their left hand, making him an orthodox fighter. Spenny is a left-handed fighter, or a southpaw fighter. He jabs with his right hand and crosses with his left hand. There are several factors guiding a southpaw to having an advantage over an orthodox fighter. The way a southpaw moves is opposite to what an orthodox fighter will be expecting. Punches come from different angles. Head and body are suddenly at different distances from what an orthodox fighter is used to. The only way to train to fight a southpaw is to have a southpaw training partner, which, duh, right? But statistically speaking, there are many more right-hand dominant fighters out there, so sourcing a southpaw to train with can be difficult. Just for those reasons, I think Spenny's southpaw stance would have been tricky for Kenny to deal with. By the way, I am aware that neither guy is a trained fighter, so much of that may not apply. However, I'm sticking with it. Spenny would have won. So let's give this a rating. Boxing gets a measly, pathetic 1 apple to the scrotal speed bag Bobby. And that's me being generous, because it deserves a 0 out of 5. The scheme is terrible. Lock Spenny in a closet while I tour around Niagara Falls. The competition doesn't even happen. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The best part of the series is watching Kenny lose, but then scheme his way into convincing Spenny to do the humiliation. That's what I'm here for, and unfortunately, nothing like that happens here. Kenny just doesn't participate. What a waste of an episode. Interactions? What interactions? There's no banter here. There's no back and forth. There's really only one thing that happens in this episode. A reaction. I like the way Kenny builds tension by duct taping foam all over his body, only to have a bucket of piss and shit thrown on him instead of the physical showdown he was expecting. That gets a full Bobby. However, it's a pity Bobby, because despite the 2 cameramen getting better angles of Kenny being splattered with piss and shit, they chose to go with the shot from the camera inside the closet of Spenny tossing the bucket. It's the money shot, but instead of showing the girl's face getting splattered, they only show the guy's unit chucking buckets. Entertainment value, I don't find this one entertaining at all. There are moments which are mildly chuckle-worthy, but few and far between. Not really worth adding this one to a playlist. And finally, there were no secondary characters involved in this one. Before we move on, I want to reiterate my most sincere disappointment in the fact that Spenny didn't force Kenny to fight him in a boxing match as the humiliation. But, piss your pants, okay, I'll get over it. Boxer aired on March 23, 2004, marking the end of the series for a period of time. After an indecent advertisement for Kenny vs. Spenny aired during children's block programming, the CBC experienced some complaints about the commercial, and as a result, the show was cancelled. There's some confusing speculation as to whether the CBC directly cancelled it, or if John Moranis, the man who landed the Season 1 26-episode contract in the first place, was the one who cancelled it. But that's irrelevant anyway. The common denominator between the two explanations is that the racy commercial, followed by a torrent of complaints, was the catalyst for important people to take a closer look at Kenny vs. Spenny. Of all the various pieces of non-episode KvS media out there, I've never seen one labeled "the commercial that got us cancelled," but it might be the one I'm about to show you right now.
every week a new competition. One will win and one will lose.
Stop it!
Kenny versus Spenny.
No cheating.
Tuesdays at 5:30 on CBC television.
1 year, 6 months, and 24 days later, Kenny and Spenny would get their first, second, third, fourth chance to make Kenny versus Spenny. So in order to pay homage to the show getting a fourth and maybe even a fifth chance, there is no randomizer for this video. Instead, the next video will focus on their most significant rebirth: beer. So what do you think? Did Spenny only spend 2.5 hours in the closet? Was that the commercial that got them canceled? Will Kenny talk Netflix into picking up the show? Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to help the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.